I saw on that sort of list of suggestions for how to Zoom that we keep cameras off. I've heard some conflicting advice on that because some people wanted sort of actual members of public bodies to keep video on for.
Oh, yes, that was more, yes. I would recommend that anybody who is on the commission or body that is present tonight, they have their video on. And for the people who are not speaking, that they keep their video off.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe we're now live on YouTube.
Okay, I'll wait for the cue to start from Miriam. Or Melissa, I guess.
Thank you, just one moment. Okay, we are live.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. Thank you to everyone for attending our first virtual meeting. Please be patient as this is new territory for all of us, as it may be for you. Luckily, we have some extra members of San Bruno City staff who have had some experience running these meetings, and they're helping us tonight. I'd like to say a big thank you to them for making this meeting possible, and staff has also undertaken a remarkable amount of work to prepare their reports for tonight. Thank you for everyone for making this possible and keeping forward progress moving in our city. To our fellow members of the public, please know that we want to hear from you. If you're in the audience and you would like to address the Planning Commission during public comment for the item on the agenda, please use the raise your hand button. It's at the bottom of Zoom. When it is your turn to speak, the city clerk, Melissa, she'll call your name and she will unmute you and you will be given 3 minutes to address the commission. If you are joining us by telephone, you can also address the commission during public comment by pressing star 9, and the city clerk will address you and unmute you. And you will also be given 3 minutes to address the commission. And please note, anyone in attendance may only speak once per agenda item. A quick note to my fellow commissioners, for clarity during our remote meeting, we will be doing roll call votes for every item on our agenda. We will also be using, this is new, we'll be using a roll call vote to close public comment in our sessions. So please be prepared to motion and second, and staff will facilitate a roll call vote to close public comment. So we'll begin with our roll call for attendance. Pamela, can you please lead our roll call?
Of course. Chair Lathin.
Present.
Vice Chair Biasotti.
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Here.
Commissioner Harmon.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And we are going to do the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. And Melissa Thurman, our city clerk, will present the flag, and I will lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. I think this is it. I will begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will move on to our business items. The first is the approval of our minutes from February 18th, 2020.
Through the chair, I have some comments regarding the minutes.
Yes.
So item 4A, these are the minutes from February. Item 4A states that we received a presentation from Roy Brunnold, Chief Building Official. We actually did not receive that presentation. Mr. Brunnold did not attend the meeting. nor was any actual presentation actually prepared. Instead, we were asked questions about topics we would want to see in an actual future presentation. So that whole bullet is wrong. In item 4B, the housing related summary, we received a very informative presentation and we had a lot of comments and questions, and there was a lot of back and forth where we got asked clarifying questions, and none of that is appearing in the minutes. And then under item 6, comments from committee members, I presented comments about my concern about the reduced role this commission has on large projects. And I also believe that Commissioner Harmon gave us a summary of a seminar he had recently attended, and none of that is appearing in the minutes either. So if I have major problems with these minutes, then I will not vote to accept that.
Does anybody else have any comments on the minutes? Maybe Commissioner Harmon, do you recall?
I mean, Tom already, I did it. I mean, I don't know that the summary of the training was, that important. The materials are definitely still available. I passed them on through staff. They're available, but yes, I agree with Commissioner Hamilton's critique.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Is this something we can have the staff correct? Approve it and correct it, approve it tonight and correct, and then have them correct it going forward? Or do you want that, Tom, do you want them to bring it back?
I think we need to bring it back because it's not, when normally when there's corrections like, oh, that word should have been this word or whatever, that's clear. There's entire sections missing. So I think it needs to come back.
Okay. Any other commissioners?
I support that.
Okay. So I suppose we could accept a motion to request staff to review the minutes and bring it back to our next meeting.
I can make a motion to recommend that staff redo the minutes and put in the missing pieces and bring it back for the next meeting for acceptance.
Okay.
I will second.
All right. I guess we're doing roll call. Do we need Commissioner Hamilton to clarify any further things that he wanted to have reviewed, or is staff clear about what we need to, what's missing?
Through the chair, I apologize. Commissioner Hamilton is absolutely right. The chief building official did not make a presentation. I will definitely make that amendment. We're trying to move into a summary action minutes, so it does not have the details as you are used to see. I will add, I'll take your suggestion, add more summary to the presentation that I gave in February, and also add the items that were presented under item number 6. However, I do want to emphasize is that it will not be the full details that were presented to Planning Commission in the past. But I'll definitely make amendment and bring it back to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps we can, it sounds like we need to do a roll call vote. So if that could be facilitated, that'd be great.
Sure. Chair Lathin,
Aye.
Vice Chair Biasotti,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton,
I
Commissioner Harmon,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye.
You have 6-0.
Okay, thank you. We now are ready for public comment. Melissa, do we have any members of the public who would like to speak on items that are not on the agenda?
At this time, there are no hands up, but once again, for the members of the public who are in the audience, if you would like to use the raise your hand feature, you should see an option at the bottom of your screen. If you are calling by phone, which I don't see anybody in there, you can press *9 for future reference if you call anybody. But right now there are no hands up.
Okay, all right, well, they'll have their opportunity to do this again at the close of our meeting. So we will go ahead and see if there are any announcements of conflict of interest. Are there any commissioners who need to recuse themselves on any items this evening? No.
No.
Okay. All right. So then we'll go ahead and move into our public hearing items. Item 4A is with regards to the San Bruno Recreation and Aquatic Center at 251 City Park Way. We will be reviewing an environmental impact report, or EIR, for the project pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. The Planning Commission will consider certification of the final EIR, approval of the use permit and the architectural use permit. We will also review a request for an architectural review permit and use permit to demolish the existing Veterans Memorial Building and pool to construct a new 2-story, 49,360 square foot San Bruno Recreation and Aquatic Center pursuant to sections 12.108.010 and 12.96170.c.4 of the San Bruno Municipal Code. The City of San Bruno is the applicant and the owner. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you so much. I will begin sharing my screen now. All right, and you can all see my screen and hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I'm Kelly Beggs, Contract Senior Planner for the City of San Bruno, and I'm pleased to present the item before you tonight, which, as Chair Lethen correctly said, includes a request for use permit, an architectural review permit, certification of a final EIR, adoption of the CEQA findings, and a mitigation monitor reporting program to allow for construction of a new recreation and aquatic center for the City of San Bruno. This slide shows what we'll be discussing this evening. I'll be turning it over to Joanne McGreeny, Community Services Director for the city, to review the project's background, and we'll then move into the existing conditions, the proposed project, and the environmental review. Daheen Meng with Group 4 Architecture will present the project's design, and then we will wrap up with tonight's action. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joanne McGreeny, Community Services Director.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm delighted to be a part of the presentation for this project with you all tonight. I'll be providing some background on how this project came to be. In 2013, consistent with the terms of the settlement agreement between the city and Pacific Gas and Electric Company in the amount of $70 million, the city established an independent, not-for-profit San Bruno Community Foundation to manage the restitution, settlement funds, and to oversee the use of the funds. In 2015, San Bruno Community Foundation sponsored a broad-based community listening campaign, which identified the community's highest priorities to be the replacement and/or addition of new community facilities, including 1, a new library, 2, a recreation center, 3, a swimming pool to replace existing facilities, and 4, a new community center to support delivery and expansion of community programs and services, and to meet the community's needs for meeting and community gathering and event space. A subsequent facilitated community discussion process was conducted to identify which among the 4 community facilities discussed should proceed with design and construction as the community's highest priority for use of the $50 million allocated by the San Bruno Community Foundation. That process concluded in February of 2017 with the San Bruno City Council's approval of the Community Facility Prioritization Report, which identified replacement of the Recreation Center and Aquatic Center as one of the community's highest priorities. Community outreach was conducted during the project's schematic design phase to get community's feedback on the site design and materials. As you can see, approximately 1,788 members of the community provided feedback that is incorporated into the project that you will see tonight. This slide presents this year's meetings, which began in March with updates to the San Bruno Community Foundation and the City Council, continued with the project's Architectural Review Committee meeting, and culminate tonight with a Planning Commission meeting. Now I'll turn the presentation back over to Kelly Beggs, who will describe the existing conditions and the proposed project.
Thank you, Joanne. So this slide presents an aerial view of San Bruno City Park and its surroundings. As you can see, the park is surrounded by residential, institutional, and educational uses with Parkside Middle School, which is located over here. St. Robert's Catholic Church and Elementary School located here to the north, and then the former El Cristal Elementary School to the south, which is proposed as a new private Stratford school. St. Andrew's Episcopal Church is also located to the south a little bit further off of the slide here. The existing San Bruno City Park includes the Veterans Memorial Building, the San Bruno Park Pool, 3 baseball fields, tennis courts, multiple picnic areas and playgrounds, and 3 parking areas. The park is bisected by City Park Way, which you can see here, which then connects Crystal Springs Road to the north to DeSoto Way, which is south of the site. A channelized creek, Elzanjan Creek, runs through the park, and you've probably seen it running along City Park Way here, and then it moves into the parking area here. And then it moves into an underground culvert north of here. This slide shows photographs of the existing park and facilities. The bottom right photograph does show that existing alignment of City Parkway and Elzanjan Creek with the creek running into the parking stalls, as you can see right here. Then the top 2 photographs are of the Veterans Memorial Building, which was constructed in 1955 and is approximately 30,700 square feet in size. The existing Veterans Memorial Building and pool would be demolished, and City Park Way and Elzanjan Creek would be realigned as part of the proposed project, which I will move in now. This slide shows the site plan. And as you can see, the parking along City Park Way would be separated into a dedicated lot and then realigned. This City Park Way would be moved to the south at this portion, and then the creek would also be realigned to be out of the vehicle right of way and to remove interference with those parking stalls and overall improve the safety of the site for pedestrians and for vehicles. The new proposed building footprint would be here. There's a public plaza located here. And then there's also a large lawn area that you'll see here. This area is proposed to be converted into an outdoor pool and a 0 entry wading pool and splash pad in phase 2 of the project, but that is pending the availability of additional funding. And we have some more illustrations later in the presentation that'll show you what that would look like. So this slide shows the first floor plan. The main entry to the lobby and community lounge is located right here. An additional entry is located here. That entry would be used seasonally during camps and for special events, so most of the entry of the public would occur through this location. The major features of this floor include the indoor pool and the gymnasium. The indoor pool is adjacent to men's and women's locker rooms, among other storage and utility areas, as well as 2 family changing rooms and 2 party rooms here. You can see there are staff offices and a control desk located near that main entryway here, a gym with bleachers for spectators located here, and then 3 classrooms located here. These 2 medium classrooms would have a movable partition that would allow for conversion of this room into 1 large room. There are 2 stairwells and 2 elevators that lead up to the 2nd floor, located here, and I will move into that 2nd floor plan now. This slide depicts the 2nd floor plan, which includes an elevated walking track, fitness, cardio, and weights area, group exercise room, community hall, catering kitchen, and conference room. The community hall, similar to those classrooms on the 1st floor, does have a movable partition wall here that would allow the space to be either separated into 2 spaces or used as 1 larger space. It also opens onto an outdoor deck. And then lastly, there are some additional staff offices located here. This slide shows the project's overall tree planting and removal plan. I'll also move into some zoomed in versions, as I imagine this could be a bit difficult to see the detail. 52 heritage trees would be removed during construction of the proposed project, and 52 new trees would be planted. The proposed species consist of coast live oaks and sycamore trees, both of which are native species. And then just to note that almost half of the heritage trees that will be removed are eucalyptus trees, which are non-native trees that present fall risks and fire hazards. This slide shows the proposed tree planting around the parking area and adjacent to the creek, which you can see the Lighter color here is the sycamore and the darker is the coast live oaks. This slide presents a section of the site to help you understand how the landscaping and the outdoor public areas will all work together. The main entry you can see is located here, and then it transitions into the community plaza. The community plaza is centered around a preserved coast live oak tree, which would be protected during construction. And then seat stairs lead up into the seasonal entry located here, which you can also see has been planned around preservation of a large redwood tree. Then past that area, there is the lawn area, which would be eventually converted into an outdoor pool area, which I'll show you in the next slide. So this is phase 2 of the project. And as you can see, there's an additional outdoor pool and a splash pad and zero entry pool located here. Now I'll move on to the project's environmental review. So an EIR was prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. The process began with a notice of preparation that was circulated to agencies and interested parties to help identify issues that the environmental report should focus on. After the scoping period, a draft EIR was prepared to analyze environmental impacts. The draft EIR was then released for public comment for a 45-day period. And following the close of that period, a response to comments documents was prepared to clarify and answer any comments and questions. Lastly, the final EIR was published on the project's website and sent to any commenters on May 8th of this year. I'll note that the final EIR consists of that draft EIR document and the response to comments document together. This slide shows a summary of all of the resource topics that are analyzed by the EIR. In this left box, these are all of the impacts that were deemed to be less than significant. And then in this gray box right here, these are all of the resource topics that the project would result in impacts that are less than significant with mitigation, meaning that mitigation measures would be implemented by the city to prevent environmental impact to these resource topics. Regarding transportation, I will note that we received a question from Commissioner Harmon regarding the project's use of level of service, also known as LOS analysis, as a threshold of significance rather than vehicle miles traveled, also referred to as VMT analysis. Cities are required to use VMT as the significance threshold, but that will start later on this year in July. As the project's transportation analysis was initiated over a year ago and approvals would be complete prior to July, the LOS analysis is appropriate for the project, but I also wanted to note that there is a brief VMT analysis in the response to comments document. Lastly, the project did have one significant and unavoidable impact due to demolition of the Veterans Memorial Building, which would result in a substantial adverse change on a historical resource. Mitigation measures that require the documentation of the Veterans Memorial Building prior to demolition would minimize this significant cultural resources impact, but there is no mitigation measure that could reduce the impact to less than significant. Lastly, regarding the environmental review, there are a number of resolutions which have a number of environmental documents attached today. So I did just want to go over what all of these things are. The final EIR, as I mentioned before, consists of the draft EIR and the response to comments document. The findings and statement of overriding considerations document presents written findings for identified significant impacts accompanied by a brief explanation for the rationale for each of those findings. And the statement of overriding considerations is for significant and unavoidable impacts and just balance the project benefits against the significant unavoidable impacts. Then lastly, the mitigation monitoring and reporting program specifies the implementation timeline, responsibility, and oversight of all of the mitigation measures. Now I'll move on to tonight's action. And so that includes adoption of 2 resolutions regarding the project's CEQA documents and permit approvals. I will revisit this slide, but first we'll do a brief presentation from the project architect on the project's design. I'll also note prior to the design presentation that the Architectural Review Committee did review this project in March and expressed support for the project's design and materials and recommended Planning Commission approval. So now I will hand it over to Daheen Meng. She's representing the Project Architect Group 4, and she will take us through the project design.
Thanks, Kelly. Do you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
As Joanne mentioned earlier in the presentation, we're working closely with the community and getting them engaged through the multiple rounds of outreach and surveys. The current design captures the design values which were prioritized by the community, which were stucco finish, natural stone, and wood. This is the view from the City Parkway. The first portion of the building that you're seeing up on the screen is the community hall. The first floor has classrooms and the community hall on the second floor. The large corner glazing on the second floor celebrates the view out to the park and transparency to the interior activities. There's a dedicated outdoor deck for the community hall. Also, as you can see here, the main entry is highlighted with the trellis. Next slide, please. This is the view from the park side. The building is articulated through 3 large volumes that corresponds to the major program spaces, which includes the community hall, gymnasium, and auditorium. The roof for the pavilions creates a nice rhythm that breaks down the building massing in response to the interior volumes. Also, the roof on the pavilions are angled. This allows daylight into the building, daylight into the interior spaces with clerestory windows, as well as to provide good solar orientation for the potential PV panels on the roof. Clerestory glazing takes advantage for the north light, allowing indirect natural light into the building without the glare in the active spaces such as the gym and in the indoor pool. Where there is a potential for glare, we're using fritted glass on the clerestory windows. There is a community plaza in front of the building, creating indoor-outdoor spaces, destination for the community, both formal and informal uses. Next slide. This is the view from the natatorium. The smaller massing in front of the natatorium is for the party rooms. The larger corner glazing provides the view connections to the park and daylighting. Indoor-outdoor connections are strengthened with a roll-up door at the natatorium. The pool and the party rooms have direct access out to the dedicated lawn space for informal use and programming. The next slide shows the exterior material palette summary. The color palette is based on the community's input and preference for the warm earth tones. We're using stucco finishes as the base in warm shades of greens and grays, and stone as accent materials. Next slide. Stone cladding is used at the vertical accent walls that anchors the building and enrich the facades. The wood-look finish trellis and the sunshades for the windows are used for easy maintenance and durability. Also, we're using fritted glazing on the clerestory. The building design has substantial amounts of glazing throughout to let the natural light into the building and take the advantage of the beautiful park that we're in and to connect indoor to the outdoor. That's all I have for the project design. I'll toss it over to Kelly for tonight's action.
One moment, just getting my video started again. So once again, thanks to Heen. I'm returning to tonight's requested action on this slide. And then we can move on to questions and discussion. Presentation is concluded and myself, staff, and the CEQA consultant, as well as the project architects are all available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Daheen. That was a very helpful report. And I'd like to ask my fellow commissioners if they have any clarifying questions for staff.
I do have one.
Go ahead.
So in relation to the transition, obviously it is correct that the mandate from the state to transition to the VMT metric is not in force until I believe it's July 1st of this year. My understanding is that, I mean, that passed in a law like in 2013 or 2014, and quite a few cities have already fully adopted it as their standard for reviewing environmental impacts, and level of service is still commonly used as a matter of sort of traffic analysis for a project, but is considered inappropriate as an environmental metric. I mean, I guess as long as we are now anything that we're going forwards, that we're working with a consultant, they're using the VMT. But I'm just a little puzzled as to whether it was the city requested that LOS be used in this, or whether our consultant is just kind of a little slow to adapt. I did find it a little strange.
Yeah, so I think that I will actually hand that question over to Teresa Wallace, who is our CEQA consultant. You're correct in your notation of the date in which it's in effect. I think that you'll find that cities throughout the Bay Area are kind of in different phases of moving to VMT, but Teresa can probably speak to that phenomenon as she works with multiple jurisdictions.
Yes, that's true. Cities are taking varied approaches to VMT, but it is true that the metric of VMT is not required until July 1st. And so when this traffic study was initiated a year ago, the decision was to not utilize VMT as the metric and to use level of service. It's also true that level of service is no longer an impact under CEQA, but cities do have the discretion to analyze level of service and compare that to the safety impacts on the circulation system. And so, you know, that's all that I really have to add. We did include a VMT analysis in the final EIR, and the determination was that the project would actually reduce VMT compared to existing conditions. So we didn't feel it was necessary to establish a specific threshold and continue on with a project-specific analysis in this case.
Thanks, Teresa.
Commissioner Harmon, do you have any further questions about that or any comments?
Nope. I'm satisfied that we will be, moving towards. Just from the environmental perspective, like the sort of overriding concern is reducing vehicle miles traveled, and I think it's appropriate in terms of traffic and safety to now, look at the level of service through intersections. And so it was odd to find that where I think a lot of places have already adapted to the new environmental regs, but yeah, I'm fine with the answers.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other commissioners that have any clarifying questions for staff? Okay. Well, in that case, we'll go ahead and move into public comment. And as a reminder, each speaker has a 3-minute comment period. Tonight, because of our Zoom format, we will be taking public comments all at once, and then we will address them after public comment is finished. So for public comment, Melissa, are there any members of the public who have their hand raised that would like to speak on this item?
I see no hands raised.
Should we give them a minute?
We could, if any members of the public are out there, just so you are aware, we have 4 members of the public present. If you would like to speak on this item, please use the raise your hand feature. And I see no hands raised.
Through the chair, some people are not familiar with Zoom, and in some on some operating systems, you have to click the participants button first, and then the raise your hand button will appear. just let people know that, just in case they're trying to raise their hand and cannot.
Yeah, if just for a quick summary, yeah, that is correct. On some systems, if you don't automatically see the raise your hand feature, what you can do if you have a mouse or if you're on a tablet, if you just tap on the screen, you should see a ribbon appear at the bottom of your screen. And one of the icons you should see is participants. It's an image of people. Click on that. A separate box should open that has your name listed. And at the bottom of that pop-up window, you should see raise your hand, or possibly a 3-dot symbol. And when you click on that, it would have raise your hand. There are still no hands raised, just FYI.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for helping with that. Well, in that case, I suppose we'll need to do a roll call vote to close public comment.
For technical reasons, it's actually to close the public hearing.
Oh, close the public hearing. Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
Thank you. All right, shall we do a roll call vote to close the public hearing? I'll
Yes.
need a motion.
I will make a motion that we close public hearing.
Second.
Okay.
Chair Lathin,
Aye.
Vice Chair Biasotti,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Harmon,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye.
You have 6-0 votes.
Okay, thank you very much. So then we will bring it back to the commission for commission discussion. Are there any commissioners who have any further questions or points of discussion?
No.
I suppose there aren't.
No.
Okay. Well, it's so exciting to have this come before us. I'm kind of surprised we're all quiet about it, but maybe we're just feeling like it's about time.
Well, through the chair,
Right.
I think
Please.
that I believe that first of all, we've had several presentations. Many of us have served, if not all of us, in some form of ARC review or on the committee. And so we're really well informed. So I found myself as I was reading this packet that it was really understandable to me because of the rounds of times that it's come before the commission and myself. And so it's clear, you know, and it's the presentation was thorough, and I am eagerly excited for the next steps.
Yeah, through the chair, echo everything that Commissioner Johnson had to say there. The building itself is beautiful. It's really well designed. It's going to be a wonderful addition to the park. This project is a long time coming, and I'm excited to support it tonight.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I agree with all that's been said. I think it's a beautiful building. It looks fantastic. It will be a great advantage to San Bruno. And I sincerely hope that we can get funding for the second phase, because I think that would be wonderful. And especially the paddling pool. I think the younger generation will go head over heels for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Okay, well, I feel the same way. I'm delighted to see our community honored with a project like this, and it's going to be an incredible gift to our community. So thank you for everybody who's participated in bringing this to this point. So in that case, if our commission discussion is coming to a close, we'll go ahead and move into our actions. And I understand we have 2 resolutions that need to be addressed.
Can everyone see my screen? I'm just showing the action to
Can
assist.
I move to adopt the CEQA findings of fact and statement of overriding considerations and mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and approving use permit 19020 and architectural review permit 2003 based on the required findings and subject to the attached conditions of approval.
Second.
I'll second
Oh, I'm sorry. I have to say all those in favor.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote if staff could facilitate that, please.
Through the chair, this is a little different. We actually need to take 2 separate action. The first one is to adopt a resolution to certify the final EIR. That would be your first motion.
Okay, So let's motion. I'll accept a motion for that.
I will so move.
Might I interrupt? I'm so sorry. This is the city clerk, Melissa Thurman. I want to help make this easy on all of you. So I understand that we do have a motion and a second on the table for the adoption of the CEQA findings of fact, as well as the approval of the use permit 19-020 and all the language that comes with that. As Commissioner Harmon just greatly read out to all of us, I would actually say that you should complete that motion since it is on the table. And then we can do the adoption of the resolution certifying the final EIR as a separate motion after this one is finished. But we need to continue on with this motion as it was made. I believe there was a motion and a second by Commissioner Johnson, and we should do the roll call motion on that.
Got it. Thank you, Melissa. In that case, I will finish the motion by doing a roll call vote for that resolution that Commissioner Harmon just mentioned. Chair Lathin,
Aye.
Vice Chair Biasotti,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Harmon,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye.
You have 6-0 vote.
Okay. Thank you.
Then shall I also move that we adopt the resolution certifying the final environmental impact report?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And I'll second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Chair Lathin,
Aye.
Vice Chair Biasotti,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Harmon,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye.
You have 6-0 vote.
Okay. Well, I'm pleased to say that it sounds as though we have adopted these resolutions, and it will now move forward to City Council from here, yes?
No, this is actually the final action for the project.
Oh, this is. Ah,
Okay.
Yay.
okay. Wow.
Should we clap?
Love everybody.
I think
The
if we
next-
were
the
at
next, the next thing that happens is they actually build it.
Right.
a good time. Okay. Well, then we will, with smiles on our faces, move into item 4B. It's the review of the 2020 through 2025 5-year capital improvement program and fiscal year 2020 to 2021 capital improvement program budget. And I'll let staff say the rest of the details.
Through the chair, if I may, sorry for interruption.
Yes.
I was gonna ask if anyone needs to have a break before we continue with the rest of the agenda. Seeing none, we're good to go. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you
asking.
for asking.
Okay, I think we're ready for the staff report.
Okay, good evening, commissioners. Can you all hear me all right?
Michael, your volume is very low.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Okay, so before you is a request for review of the fiscal year 2021 capital improvement program budget, otherwise known as the CIP. We're reviewing it for conformance with the San Bruno General Plan pursuant to California Government Code Section 65401. This is an annual review of infrastructure related projects for the city's budget. In accordance with California Government Code Section 65401, the Planning Commission must review the CIP and make a finding that is in conformance with the general plan prior to City Council adoption. The scope of the Planning Commission review is to evaluate the CIP projects for consistency with the goals, policies, and implementation measures outlined in the 8 elements of the general plan. The action is not to evaluate the technical aspects or the cost of the individual projects we're reviewing today. And a little bit about the general plan. The general plan is the city's long-term comprehensive vision for physical development in the city. It includes 8 elements that provide policy framework related to capital projects in the areas of land use and urban design, economic development, transportation, open space and recreation, environmental resources and conservation, health and safety, public facilities and services, and of course, the housing element. So the City Council will appropriate funding for projects that are planned for construction in fiscal year 2021. However, the CIP itself covers a 5-year planning period from fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 24-25. The CIP functions as a planned work program for projects scheduled in subsequent years of the period. The CIP provides funding for capital projects that protect, preserve, and enhance the city's infrastructure, extend the useful life of public facilities, and improve or enhance city services. So now I'm going to go over and provide you a brief summary of this year's infrastructure projects that are under consideration before you today. The first one is the Commodore Tank Project. The city currently utilizes 8 water tanks within its water distribution system. These water tanks provide storage for the city-wide water systems in order to help balance differences in demands and supplies, provide emergency storage in case of supply failure, and provide adequate storage for fire protection. The Water System Master Plan that was adopted in 2012 has determined that Zone 3-5 would have a 1.4 million gallon deficit by fiscal year 2034 to 2035 due to the anticipated growth within this zone. If approved, this project would fund the design and construction of a new approximately 1.7 million gallon water tank to create storage in this zone for future demands. The preliminary location of this water tank is underneath Commodore Park. The second infrastructure project that's before you tonight is the Downtown Parking Meters Project. This project will implement the San Bruno Downtown Parking Management Plan, which was presented before you last year, which was approved by the City Council in January of 2019. This proposed project would install parking meters in the downtown area to regulate short-term parking. The installation of parking meters would push long-term parking into adjacent, longer-term surface parking lots. Details regarding the type of meters, rates, exact location, and the enforcement hours has not yet been determined for this project. The third project is the Crystal Springs Road Utility Underground Project. The California Public Utilities Commission requires Pacific Gas and Electric to set aside a portion of their utility receipts each year for use in undergrounding existing overhead utilities. This is commonly known as the Rule 20A Utility Undergrounding Rule. In February 11, 2020, the council established an underground utility district on Crystal Springs Road, extending from El Camino Real to Cunningham Way. Phase 1 of this project includes undergrounding overhead utility along approximately 2,200 feet of Crystal Springs Road from Donner Avenue to El Camino Real. And phase 2 includes undergrounding overhead utilities along approximately 1,500 linear feet of Crystal Springs Road from Donner Avenue to Cunningham Way. The fourth project is the Pedestrian Safety and Traffic Calming Project. This project involves developing a local roadway safety plan, otherwise known as an LRSP, to address the unique hot roadway safety needs in San Bruno. The city was awarded the Highway Safety Improvement Program grant funding to develop this program. The process of preparing the LRSP creates a framework to systematically identify and analyze safety problems and recommending safety improvements. Completion of the LRSP will result in a prioritized list of improvements and is a requirement to receive future HSIP federal aid funding. The fifth project is the Tom Lara Field parking lot rehabilitation. The Lara Field parking lot is well utilized by visitors of City Park, and due to heavy usage, it is in need of pavement rehabilitation. This project will rehabilitate the asphalt surfacing, create additional parking spaces where feasible, and upgrade the accessible parking spaces for compliance with current ADA requirements. The sixth project is the Senior Center trash enclosure. The San Bruno Senior Center was originally constructed in 1987 and is typically visited by hundreds of patrons weekly. The center is also used for different city events, such as City Council and Planning Commission meetings, as you're well aware of. This project would restore the trash enclosure, which is in current disrepair and is no longer functional. This includes providing new screening for the waste containers so that you can't see them from view, and diverting waste spills to the sanitary sewer system, and constructing an accessible entrance to the enclosure. And the last project is the pavement management program. This is actually an existing program that's ongoing. This program involves the repair and preventative maintenance of city streets. The condition of city streets is identified through an ongoing pavement management program called a PMP. The long-term goal is to achieve a pavement condition index, or PCI, score of 84, which would eliminate the city's deferred maintenance backlog. However, in order to achieve this, the program would need to be funded to approximately $9 million per year. The city's average score for its streets and roads is 66. Streets are selected for rehabilitation work based on their PCI score, functional class, which is their traffic volume, and other criteria. The PMP is designed to maximize pavement longevity with timely and cost-effective rehabilitation while working within budget constraints. So back to the staff report. In the staff report, you'll see staff's analysis of these 7 programs against the general plan. So if you could refer to those, you can get a sense for how these would implement the general plan. And staff is asking you tonight that if you agree with staff's analysis, that you make a motion and a second to adopt the attached Planning Commission resolution, finding that the proposed capital improvement program budget for fiscal year 2021 is in conformance with the City of San Bruno general plan. This resolution will be forwarded to the City Council and taken into consideration as they evaluate the city's fiscal year 2021 budget. Please note that this determination is not a green light for the projects themselves. And also a roll call vote is required for this. And lastly, because infrastructure projects are executed by Public Works, we have Public Works staff available with us tonight to answer any clarifying questions that you might have that would help you make your general plan consistency findings. And this concludes my presentation. And again, I'm available, and Public Works staff is available on this call as well, or this video, for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Michael. Does the commission have any clarifying questions for staff?
Through the chair, I have a couple.
Yes.
I understand that we're not voting on details of any of these projects, but just want to. I'm curious about a couple of things. The first one, the Commodore Tank project. How disruptive to Commodore Park would that construction be? Would the entire park need to be demolished in order to put a tank that large in? Are they thinking about putting in, is it something that they would have to dig up the outfield of the baseball field for a time and then of course restore it afterwards? Just a little bit of detail about what that's going to look like.
Good evening, Commissioner. My name is Haywan Ritchie. I am the city engineer for San Bruno. I can help answer some of your questions. So this project has not yet been designed, and so some of those details are unknown. I think, we would of course attempt to have the least amount of disruption as possible, but it's in these, even pre-design stages, really hard to say what that would look like.
Okay, that's fair. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a comment about the I guess fourth, whatever, the pedestrian safety and traffic calming local road safety plan. This has been a long time coming, and I'm very happy to see this. our bicycle safety committee and pedestrian committee and the TSPC, work to do this work, but they do it in a patchwork fashion length. And this having a program like this to take a comprehensive look at the whole city and put things in and prioritize things is really going to be helpful. So I'm very, very happy to see that on the list. And then my last, well, I guess 2 more questions. The Tom Lara field parking lot, I guess I'm guessing that's out of range of the aquatic center construction. Is that why this is a separate item and not part of that project?
That's correct. Good evening, commissioners. Public Works Director Jimmy Tan. That is, it is part of the it is part of the RAC, the Recreation Aquatic Project, but then we had separated out in order to have that parking lot reconstructed first prior to the construction of the Recreation Center. Okay.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. And then lastly, I mean, we've known for a while that we've fallen quite behind on our street maintenance, and that's not the fault of anybody here. That's not why I'm mentioning it. The $9 million per year that's required to get us back up to speed score-wise, is that in perpetuity? In other words, the $9 million would get us there, and then by the time we finish that, the roads we started with at the beginning need to be done again, and it's a perpetual thing, or is we need to increase funding to $9 million a year to get us back up to speed, and then the cost would drop?
Sure, I understand your question. And we are given a grant by MTC to evaluate the pavement condition of our local or our city streets. And what they do is within a 5-year time frame, evaluate various scenarios, one of them being how to eliminate our deferred maintenance. And so that means bringing all the streets up into a good condition. I understand, it's very challenging for any agency to accomplish that because of the amount of funding that's needed. But it is that $9 million per year for that 5-year period. And then after that, I mean, there would still be continued expenditures required to maintain, the condition of the road. Really what you want to do is get the streets into a good condition, and then where you can provide preventive maintenance, which is a lot less expensive to administer than, rehabilitation or, reconstruction for roads that are failed. Those, on a per square footage basis costs inordinately a lot more than, preventive maintenance. So it's really trying to get to a goal where you don't have that deferred maintenance anymore.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Those are all my questions. I appreciate the clarity on those. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other commissioners have any questions for staff?
Through the chair?
Yes.
I'll go ahead, Aros.
No, I mean, I went first earlier. You're welcome to go.
It's okay. Okay, I'll go then. I don't know who in the city would be the one to answer, but I'll just, the very first one under the water infrastructure, I wanted to just check in about how is it currently the tank maintained and monitored?
So the first project for Commodore Tank, is that, I just want to make sure I'm asking the correct question.
Yes.
So a tank currently does not exist at this location. However, our water division does maintain the 8 tanks within the city that are used to serve the population.
Okay. I must have misread that. So there is not a tank currently right there. This is going to be a
correct. It would be a new tank. A
brand new tank. Okay, good. All right. And then the next one would be under the street rehabilitation. On the first one, where it indicates where it's implementing the parking meters, and it's a push, would push long-term parking into adjacent longer-term surface parking lots. Has there been any study or any tracking if the neighbors would be impacted? Once you start charging, will it go into the neighborhoods? Because people are going to start looking, they might think, okay, I'm going to be longer than the 30 minutes or longer than the 2 hours, whatever it may be. And when it talks about that, they're going to adjacent and longer surface parking lots. Where are they and which ones are they?
Right. So the thought for this project is to hire a firm to evaluate all of that, including the rates, along downtown areas and maybe some of the sites, side streets that may be impacted by the implementation of the parking meters, in the downtown. So, once we have the study completed, and we can, we will be able to determine all of those questions that you've, asked just now.
Okay.
But currently, right now, we just don't have a lot of the information. But we understand too that, if we do implement parking meters in the downtown, it would definitely push a lot of the vehicles to the residential areas too, and then we'll try to minimize that if we can.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then the facility upgrade. I think that question was out of the range. I had the same question on that. It's out of the range of the recreation project, and that's why it's being proposed in this way. Okay.
Correct.
And then on the senior center trash enclosure, I know that it's the trash enclosure, and I can't help but push the question just a little bit. That building is 33 years old. Is there any chance of it being placed for any painting? I mean, it's not chipping and peeling, but it is quite, the painting is quite antiquated from a point of it's not going to fit within the modernization of our park. And it is very southwest look, and as it is, doesn't have really attractive windows in the front. I'm just thinking, can there possibly be a potential painting to the building?
Yeah, so this is something that I can bring towards attention to the community services director, who currently manages the building and facilities division. So I can inquire whether any future painting is scheduled for this building. And in regards to this trash enclosure, this was a result of the accident that happened, a few years back.
Yeah.
And we restored the corner of the building, but the trash enclosure there was an interest to actually increase and expand the footprint of the trash enclosure. And so that's something that we've been kind of working on to try to do that.
Okay. Well, I would appreciate that, because the building really is quite small. It's not a huge project, but I recognize that everything costs and everything is time. Right. But this would be the time to do it. It's kind of like an applicant comes forward, we push the limit, push the bar a little bit, raise the bar a little bit for applicants to do the next step, whatever it may be. And that's what I'm hoping for our building. As you come down, it's a main building that you see, and to have it be attractive to look at. It's maintained, but be attractive to just blend in as they drive towards the park. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
And let's see. My question was answered on the perpetual project of the other one. I think that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any other commission questions? Go ahead.
All right. So just to understand the Commodore Park tank project, I mean, the goal here is that basically it provides a buffer that smooths out demand in terms of the inflows and outflows. This is not, I mean, my understanding is that our long-term sort of overall water provision on the scale of a year is fairly solid given the city's history. And so this is project is simply to make sure that this neighborhood, their kind of surge demand is met as the population there increases. Is that basically accurate?
Yes, and so our water supply is secure. That's the long-term projections for the water supply for the city as a whole. What the tank is doing, it's providing some of the demands of peak demands. If there were to be a large, emergency or fire flow situation, it would assist in those types of situations as well. As unusual as they may be, it would be helping to provide that supply.
Okay, just making sure I'm sort of reading the descriptions correctly. and I noted that, I mean, I know we have ongoing investments in the water infrastructure with the replacement of the water and sewer lines starting in the heart. I think I actually saw some notifications that a project was going in pretty close to me over at in the vicinity of First Avenue. And that's basically, that's all already budgeted and hence is not showing up here. Is that,
That's correct.
okay.
Those are previous projects
Right.
in other CIP.
Okay. Regarding the meter project, the description was, sorry. I mean, I guess it says details regarding type of meters hasn't been determined yet. With the scope of that study, this is somewhat maybe a personal thing. I rather like the completely virtual systems where you sort of minimize, you don't have posts in people's way along the sidewalk. And so I just wondered if that's already under consideration to do sort of a very minimal system where you punch your license plate in at a kiosk or through a phone app and then it's all observed with the automatic license plate readers.
Correct, and you're absolutely right on the right path, and that's something that we've actually looked at. We've actually looked at several vendors already.
Oh, wonderful.
And had some demonstrations of that. So yes, license plate readers are something that we're considering right now in order for enforcement.
Yeah,
and the gang meters, a single kiosk where everyone just goes up instead of having individual pay stations.
Yeah. It both seems like less disruption of the public space and possibly cheaper to maintain. So it seems sensible. That's great. Okay, I am glad to hear that. And then regarding the utility undergrounding, I wondered whether it is possible for CityNet to get in on some kind of collaboration with PG&E so that if we did want to get our, because my understanding is a fair amount of our cable lines are strung overhead as well, I think. And it seems like if we're going to dig up the street, can we get those cable lines buried so that they're not vulnerable to windstorms as well, and as well as having the opportunity to say, once we have sort of a CityNet, I don't know if the right term is a right of way, but that if we then do want to pull fiber through, we have the conduit. And fiber in particular, my understanding is you can reasonably run it in proximity to alternating current lines, and because it's optical, it doesn't interfere, whereas the coaxial cable, that's more of a problem.
Right, so the project is to underground a lot of the overhead utilities along the corridor from Crystal Springs, along Crystal Springs Road from El Camino to Donner. That's the first phase. With that, if there isn't a fiber system, the city's net fiber system along that route, it's something that we could consider. We would have to talk to the CityNet staff to figure what their actual needs are within the corridor.
Okay. Well, I guess, I mean, because like the document specified it was a PG&E undergrounding, so I mean, it seemed like it was about the power lines, but I just, I mean, I know like budgets are tight, blah, blah, I mean, there are issues, but it seemed like if we're going to approve spending some city money, I don't know if that's like, if we're basically spending PG&E's money that's allocated to us for it, or exactly what the budgeting here is. But if we're spending money to dig up the street and bury the power lines, it seems like it would be better to also do the cable lines at minimum at the same time, and ideally be in a situation where we then have access to come back and string fiber. Because I think, I don't know, this is not an area in which I have super deep expertise, but my understanding is it is typically possible once you have a conduit in place to pull additional lines through it without completely digging it up again.
Right, and so the PG&E it's not the only utilities that will be undergrounded. If there's communication lines that are within.
Okay, so that already would be planned, as if there are things like SB cable lines running along those, that would already be planned to be undergrounded in the same project.
That's correct, because the overall goal is to remove all of the wooden poles that exist along the corridor. So anything that are actually strung right now, along those poles will be undergrounded, regardless of whether it would be PG&E or not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I guess if I could also clarify, these are Rule 20A tariffs, and so they are rates collected by PG&E that are meant for this purpose. So other than our contributions to things that the Rule 20A wouldn't cover, it is something that PG&E's rates would be covering. And no, they're often referred to as dollars, but they're not actually dollars. They refer them more as credits.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the commission for staff?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Okay. Well, in that case, we get to open it up to public comment again. So members of the public, if you would like to express your comments or share anything, this is your chance. Go ahead and raise your hand, perhaps in the participants button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And Melissa, are you seeing anything?
No, I do not. We do have two members of the public, and to note, one is council liaison Marty Medina, and the other is a public works employee. So they are still considered members of the public, though, but to be technical, but no, they do not have their hands up.
Okay.
I just wanted to note them just to say hi more than anything. There you go.
Okay. Well, in that case,
oh, well, you know what? Marty Medina just raised his hand. So as a council liaison, I will bring him in. Just one moment. Councilmember Medina, are you able to hear us?
Yes, good evening. Only because I was called. I was just gonna listen in, but I wanted to say good evening and thank all of the everybody for the work that they're doing, and I definitely appreciate it, and I'm sure the rest of the council does too. So thank you.
Thank you. All right.
And I see no other hands raised.
Okay. Well, in that case, we can entertain a motion to close public comment.
And take a roll.
Sorry, to be technical again, it's close the public hearing. I do just want to do that for the record. For the record, I'm a nerd. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. We will close public hearing with a motion.
I make a motion to close public hearing.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Chair Listen,
Aye.
Vice Chair Biasotti,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Harmon,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye.
You have 6-0 votes.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll go ahead and call the public hearing closed. Let's see here. Do we have any discussion amongst the commissioners?
No.
Okay. Well, in that case, if we'd like to adopt the resolution, we can start with a motion.
I make a motion we accept the resolution for the approval of the capital improvement program.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Chair Listen,
Aye.
Vice Chair Biasotti,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Harmon,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye.
You have 6 votes.
Okay. Thank you. All right. That is passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And then in that case, we'll go on to item 4C. This is regarding the short-term residential rentals. And this item was previously agendized for the March 17th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting, but that meeting was canceled due to the shelter-in-place order. So tonight we will review and make a recommendation to City Council at a future public hearing for adoption of the amendment of Chapter 12.80 definitions and Chapter 12.270 of the San Bruno Municipal Code regarding short-term residential rentals. Staff report?
Good evening. My name is Pamela Wu. I am the city's planning and housing manager. And tonight I have the pleasure of providing you with the municipal code amendment regarding regulation and permitting of the short-term residential rental. Tonight's agenda, I'll start with the objective for this item, then provide a background for the ordinance proposed, followed by an overview of how ordinance will work, and conclude my presentation with tonight's action and answer any questions that you may have. The objective for tonight is for Planning Commission to adopt the ordinance amending San Bruno Municipal Code, Chapter 12.80, in parentheses definitions, and adding Chapter 12.270, in parentheses short-term residential rentals. Next, I'll summarize the background leading up to the work that has been invested into the proposed ordinance structure. In the recent years, cities have experienced growth in the use of residential properties as short-term rentals. These rentals are typically advertised on online hosting platforms such as Airbnb, HomeAway, VRBO, or any other online platforms. These platforms allow guests to rent rooms or the entire house from hosts on a short-term basis. Most of these rental duration are 30 days or less. This is also a result of the new shared economic model, where an unoccupied or underutilized resource in general demand is made available to rent to optimize utilization. Currently in San Bruno, there are no adopted regulations for the city to use to proactively identify these properties, regulate their uses, or collect permit fees and taxes. Whereas many other local cities such as Pacifica, Redwood City, or South San Francisco have adopted zoning regulations and permitting requirements to regulate these uses and their potential effects. However, establishing, implementing, and enforcing these regulations and collecting the tax revenue requires dedicated city time and resources, which presents several policy issues for the city to consider when determining the appropriate level of city regulatory oversight and control. On July 10th, 2018, the City Council held the first study session and received a summary report that examined short-term rentals in the city. In return, the City Council provided several key directions to staff. They asked staff to research other cities' STR regulations regarding regulatory land use permits, to investigate parking-related concerns, to examine mechanisms for tax collection, to examine allowing STRs only in certain areas, neighborhoods, and also consider establishing a maximum number of short-term rentals citywide. Staff researched these items and provided response in the staff report. This comparison matrix is also included as attachment 2 in your staff report, which summarizes regulation approaches in nearby cities that have adopted regulations recently. In January 2020 this year, City Council held the second study session to review the attached proposed ordinance and provide a further direction regarding regulation and permitting short-term residential rentals. Specifically, the council provided input that resulted in a few minor modifications to the draft ordinance. These input include allowing accessory dwelling units, ADUs, where the primary single-family dwellings is owner-occupied, to be used as a short-term residential rental use subject to an annual limit of 120 days. Staff's original recommendation was 90 days, and while there was no clear consensus on the annual limit, 120 days was suggested and staff is in agreement that this is the optimal number. Secondly, council provided input to allow the entire unit to be utilized as a short-term residential unit, subject to an annual limit of 120 days a year. Again, staff's original recommendation was 180 days. While there was no clear consensus, 120 days was suggested and staff's in agreement that this is the optimal number. Lastly, council directed staff to amend the definition section in the zoning code to be consistent with the new STR ordinance. Therefore, staff has amended definition in chapter 12.80 so that the uses listed are consistent for the draft ordinance. As the city currently does not have any adopted comprehensive regulations for short-term residential rentals, there are definitions and zoning regulations for hotels, boarding houses, and rooming houses, but they are not tailored to short-term rentals. For instance, a hotel is any facility that has 6 or more guest rooms, but they're not allowed in residential districts. Uses such as a boarding house or a rooming house are allowed where lodging is provided for 3 or more persons for compensation, and they're only allowed in R3 and R4, subject to a use permit. Today, the city has no record of any use permit that was granted for a rooming house or boarding house. Lastly, in R1 zone, houses can be rented out up to 2 unrelated individuals, or the entire house could be rented out for any duration of the time. The city's municipal code also allows taxation to be imposed for short-term rentals. For instance, all business, including short-term rentals, are required to obtain a business license for conducting business in the city. However, absent a specific program designed to identify those short-term rental units, the operators are not obligated to obtain a business license. Today, no operators have applied voluntarily. In addition, the city's transient occupancy tax, the TOT tax ordinance, applies to any transient who occupies at any hotel, including short-term rentals. The TOT requires that any transient who stays 30 days or less to pay a 12% tax to the operator, who is required to remit the tax to the city. The inclusion of short-term rental in this ordinance is a change that was approved by the City Council last summer as a Chapter 3 Munico update. Short-term rentals, like hotels, are a source of transient in a city who utilize city resources. However, there's no mechanism to identify and collect taxes, and none have been collected voluntarily. Since there's no current regulation to permit existing short-term rentals, staff has conducted a survey and found that there are 11 complaints regarding suspected short-term rentals since May 2018, which represents about a 1% of the total number of complaints that were registered at the same time. These complaints involve illegal construction inside a unit to partition each bedroom separately so that the renters would not be benefit. This also includes a whole house being rented out to different parties without adequate supervision by property owners, or the whole dwelling units that were operated as a transient lodging. I'll close this section by mentioning that while there were a number of STR short-term rental complaints, with the recent COVID-19, it is anticipated the short-term rental uses in city will be dramatically reduced, as both travel for business and pleasure will be significantly reduced as well. Next, I'll provide an overview of the proposed short-term residential rental ordinance. The key features of this ordinance include establishing a regulatory permit requirement and process. And this would also include the type of short-term residential rentals, the locations where they're allowed, and the annual duration limit for each type of unit. This will also include a defined objective operational standards and provide clear requirements for owners. And lastly, this will define established taxation and licensing requirement. The first guiding policy consideration for the proposed ordinance is to decide on whether and how to regulate STRs through a land use-based regulatory zoning ordinance. Staff has prepared a proposed ordinance that strikes a moderate balance between potential neighborhood effects as well as city and property owner financial benefits. The application fees will be set by the City Council in the master fee schedule at a later date. This can also mandate and verify appropriate insurance policies. Next, the guiding policy focuses on the type of STRs, where they can be allowed for an annual duration that could be imposed for each of the allowed STR unit. In the chart, it shows that the proposed ordinance differentiates STRs into 3 categories. The first category are the non-hosted units versus the second category, the hosted stays, and the accessory dwelling ADU units. The non-hosted units are those that, The non-hosted units are those that are typically involved the entire house to be rented out, where the owner is not present during the stay. Based on council's direction from this January, an annual limit of 120 days for such stay is imposed for non-hosted residential rentals. The second category include the hosted stays, where this could include 1 or 2 or up to 3 bedrooms or any other portion of the existing house to be rented out, with the owner who also occupies on premise. Based on this scenario, there is no limit in terms of how many days short-term rental could be rented out. However, there is a limit of up to 3 bedrooms for any hosted short-term rentals. Lastly, ADUs can also be used for short-term rentals up to 120 days, and this is per City Council's direction. These provisions would allow for optimal utilization of existing house and income creation for property owners while maximizing city's tax revenue. Also, the annual cap will minimize the potential for loss of longer duration stays, which are the longer housing stock. There are other guiding policy considerations aimed to define objective operational standards and provide clear requirements for operators. In return, this will ensure health, safety, and the welfare for both San Bruno residents and visitors to the city of San Bruno. Some of these operational standards include requiring the existing parking spaces to be provided for short-term rental guests, that short-term rental guests will comply with city's noise regulation, and that emergency safety information are clearly posted in the short-term rental premise. And lastly, owner-operator should make sure that there's always a local contact available to answer any questions. In addition to providing land use regulations, guiding policy objectives pertaining to adequately collect tax revenue and issuing business license are required for any operator providing transient occupancy unit. While these are not under the zoning code regulations, I want to mention this to make sure that the Planning Commission is aware the role of the city taxation and city licensing requirement relating to the short-term residential rental use. To conclude, tonight's action, staff recommends the Planning Commission to adopt a resolution recommending the City Council adopting the ordinance amendment, including, Chapter 12.80 and adding a new Chapter 12.270. Following tonight's action, City Council will have 2 separate meetings to introduce the ordinance and then adopt the ordinance. We anticipate this may be scheduled during the summer. Additionally, staff will be working on implementing of the short-term rental program, such as developing the permit application requirements, forms, checklists, guidelines, informational handout, and other material. Staff will also be dedicating a website where information about the new regulation and permit type, permit application, and other relevant information are available to those who are interested. This concludes my presentation, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Pamela. Does the commission have any clarifying questions for staff?
Through the chair?
Yes.
I think I went first last time, so I wasn't going to go first, but I'll go ahead.
We don't track.
Would the software providers be required to verify the existence of a permit before allowing a new San Bruno property to be put onto their platforms? Or is this something that we would be monitoring after the fact?
Through the chair, the exact administration of the program has not been vetted out, and we have talked about contacting or contracting a consultant to help the staff to administer the program, but there's no definite answer in that direction yet.
Okay. And that leads right into my second question. I'm really hoping that the city will adopt a model similar to what I understand happens in Redwood City, where all of the work for collecting the taxes and administering that whole thing was all pushed on to the software providers who just put that stuff right into their systems, and the city just collects checks. So I mean, obviously it's not quite that simple, but I don't want to see us lose too much of the revenue that's going to come in here to unnecessary oversight. So I very much recommend that we go to a model where we trust the providers to remit collect the taxes and remit them. And then, obviously we have periodic audits to make sure that there's compliance.
I'll definitely note that in the meeting summary forwarding to City Council.
Thank you. And just as a comment, this has been a very long time coming. The city has left quite a lot of money on the table by not doing this earlier. So I'm very glad to see this happening now.
Through the chair, I think the permitting at the moment is suggested to be every 6 months. I think it should be for a year, similar to the surrounding cities. And I just wonder, the suggested fees for licensing, it's $750 for a first time go. It seems very high compared to what other cities are charging. They're just my comments. But I definitely think the licensing should be for a year, because 6 months passes by very quickly.
I think it's biennial.
Again, okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Any other commissioners have any clarifying questions for staff?
Through the chair? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mary. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I'll give a chance to read a little bit more here.
I actually had a comment in direct response. My understanding, and staff can clarify, that I believe that fee was for 2 years. It was biennial, not semi-annual.
Through the chair, if I may, there was a fee proposed to City Council during the study session. At this time, we're going to go back to City Council for an exact fee and also with the duration. So what we're presenting to the Planning Commission for consideration tonight is the structure of the ordinance. The program itself, who's going to be implementing what, and how much, how often, will be discussed at a later date.
Okay, there definitely were numbers in there, but my reading of it was, anyway. I did have an unrelated question. Just trying to make sure I understand what the day limits that are proposed, like sort of how those would function. So when somebody has an ADU, that's sort of treated as a separate housing unit from their main house. Sort of it's permitted as a separate unit and rents out as a separate unit. And so if we imagine somebody had, say, a 3-bedroom house and an ADU, what I'm trying to figure out is, would they be able to rent out the 3 bedrooms of their house for 120 days and then sort of pack themselves into the ADU to be out of the way of their guests, and then rent out the ADU separately for an additional 120 days? Which, I mean, honestly, 240 days out of 360 actually seems pretty reasonable to me. But if that is the case, then I do wonder if, it's like, if you have 3 bedrooms at an ADU, you can get up to 240 days. But if you have a 4 or 5 bedroom house, you can get 120 days. It seems like it might be more reasonable for for us to try to account this and just say like, you know, like for the parcel, you can get 180 or 240 days to make it more consistent between those different arrangements. And I will say, regardless, I'm fine with approving this. We can always come back and amend it later, you know, if we find that the way it works is not satisfactory. But it did, when I was reviewing that, it sort of, if I'm reading it right, and the 120-day limits apply separately to two different buildings on the same property, it does seem like maybe we want to rethink that.
All right. If I'm understanding you correctly, this is assuming a property has an ADU already that could be also made available in addition to bedrooms or a whole house being rented out.
Yeah, that's sort of the scenario I'm considering. And I wasn't clear whether those two limits apply separately to the two separate buildings.
We could definitely take that and forward on to the city council and see if there's any further clarification needed.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I favor just like a longer overall limit. I think 180 or 240 would be fine rather than 120. And so if it does add up to 240 for the two, personally, I'm okay with that. But it does seem peculiar for it to apply differently depending on whether you have a large 5-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house with an ADU in the back. Like that seems odd.
Through the chair, I believe, based on the study sessions, that the intent of the limit was to keep as much housing stock for traditional owners and renters in the housing pool as possible, and to discourage folks from having a house be only for short-term rentals and removing that home permanently from the pool of housing because of the shortage. That was my understanding of what the annual limit is for. Regarding the length of it, 120 seemed reasonable. I wouldn't be against it being maybe somewhat longer, but not too much longer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a question of, do you think if you can't have it rented out a third of the time, that's enough to discourage trying to operate a property for income that way? But anyway, that could be a matter of study. But I did think the question of like the sort of one large building versus a slightly smaller main building and an outbuilding being treated differently, that seemed like something to revisit.
Sure.
And we already went over the inspection fees, and I strongly agree with Commissioner Hamilton's comments that the program should be self-funding. So as we get to allocating those fees, I just want to make sure that that time for our inspectors is fully recouped in those inspection fees. And then I know I wrote down one other question here. Yes, there was a statement in here that short-term rentals can be allowed up to 3 bedrooms in a single-family residential district for hosted stays. And I wasn't clear whether there was a limit on the number of persons per bedroom. So if people are having, I mean, is it like if it's, if you had an 8-person party that would, right, because it said 3 bedrooms. Oh, now I can't find the text. There was something about an additional part of the house being rented, but it sounded like maybe it was limiting to an 8-person party with 2 people for each of the 3 bedrooms and 2 in the rest of the house, like on a fold-out couch in the living room or something.
There was discussion about how many people could be in each bedroom. However, our current code says that each single-family residence can have up to 3 bedrooms to be rented out. At the same time, we also say that the entire house or portion of the house can be rented out to 2 unrelated individuals who are not family members. I don't believe our code specifically states how many people can be in a bedroom. That may be a building code related question in terms of occupancy, size of the bedroom, no more than 8 people or 8 person in the same bedroom for exiting or other requirement. But the way the short-term rental ordinance is structured, that we want to discourage more than 3 bedrooms or up to 2 unrelated individuals in the R1 zone to be rented out. And I should emphasize that the difference between short-term rentals and the regular rentals is the 30-day reference. Oftentimes people go on vacation, you rent it for a weekend or a week, but it doesn't necessarily go on for a whole month. Once you cross the 31 day, it's becoming just a regular rental, monthly rental, as if you will have to sign a monthly lease. So these are more shorter duration.
Right. It's possible I've confused something about the regulation because yeah, I know there's the long-term rental regulation where it's if you have owner occupied and also renting, they can rent out to 2 individuals, unrelated in separate bedrooms. But it was on page 37 of the packet, I think.
There could be in the matrix
Yeah.
comparing other cities that has the number of bedroom or number of individual in bedroom mentioned.
It's okay. I'm looking at it again. It was on page 37. It is in the matrix, and what I was looking at was the San Bruno proposed column, and what it says for the short-term rental regulation. STRs can be allowed. So yeah, that it was allowing, and I think, is this just for the hosted stay? You can rent out up to 3 rooms. And so this would potentially allow for the short-term rental, if you're going to rent out 3 bedrooms, it can't make sense for that to only be to 2 unrelated individuals. Otherwise, how are they using the 3rd bedroom?
Right. Right. So our proposed ordinance for San Bruno does talk about some STRs can be allowed up to 3 bedrooms, but it really does not have that 2-person per bedroom, which is listed in Millbrae or Redwood City's ordinance.
So potentially you could do a party of 9 that's coming in to go to a convention nearby, and they can pack in 3 people per bedroom. Which again, I'm okay with that. I'm trying to make sure I understand what we're approving.
I think we're not discussing the number of individuals that can be accommodated in the bedroom, but focusing on the number of bedrooms.
Okay. All right. At least I think I understand it now. I don't know if somebody else has questions.
Through the chair?
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you to Commissioner Hamilton and Commissioner Harmon for your very thoughtful comments this evening. Well done, both of you. Thank you. And Commissioner Hamilton's remarks about pushing the efforts off onto the software providers, I think that's brilliant. Why should we do work that someone else can do by pushing a button? I mean, we're using Zoom and it's working fine. Why wouldn't we want to automate this portion of our project? So thank you, gentlemen, for those comments.
Through the chair?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. Some of them have already been asked. Has there been any discussion with Airbnb to see how properties are used and what potential issues they have, and just to have, they're the users basically of, or the not users, the people renting are the users, but they know they know the pros and cons of this whole thing, and I'm wondering if there has been any opportunity for that end of it.
Sure, through the chair, staff has not had any formal conversation with Airbnb. However, we've had a conversation with these consultants or contractors that Commissioner Hamilton's were talking about, who have extensive knowledge on administering permitting programs, compliance modules, and whatnot. What Airbnb does is that they provide a advertising platform for those who are interested. Their perspective is slightly different than the city trying to provide a regulatory control and oversight.
Sure, I understand that. Okay, well, thank you for that feedback. Let's see. And I thought I heard you say that there's already been, did some comparisons to Millbrae, and I think you said Redwood City. So it sounds like there's been a lot of homework behind the scenes on this before it came to this point, obviously. And what about, let me look here. On page 3 of 8, there was in the very first bullet, when you talked about it, it was 120 days and then it was changed to 180 days. Was that just to align numbers, or was there some math reasons to change those numbers?
Sure, through the chair again. So it's actually the other way around. Staff has originally proposed a 180-day
Right.
where council provided input to align. I don't know if there's any math behind it, but to align the 120 days, because originally the ADUs were proposed with a limit of 90 days.
Yeah.
So the limit for ADUs went up and then others went down.
Sure, sure. I can see that. The only reason I raise even the question is sometimes we do things to make things align and to make them easier, but there are sometimes mathematical reasons behind it that doesn't always truly make sense. And I've come into experience that in different, you try to align something, but it's someone not working it really won't know. The other thing on the next one down on where you're looking at hotels, boarding houses, rooming houses, you know, there are a lot of scenarios that could be done, and you can never write everything down, but there was other language like granny units and in-law units and student units and maid quarters. There was a number of years back, I can't tell you how many years back, I don't know, maybe it's been 15 years, I don't really know, on London Court, it came before the commission, and it was a project, I believe it was 12,000 square feet, and that had a maid's quarters in there. And so some of these have already been in place. Well, I don't know how many maid's quarters we have in San Bruno, but this particular one did. And we looked at this really thorough long before any of this was ever a consideration. So I don't know if there are other places in San Bruno that might have, I mean, we're calling them ADUs now, we're calling them other things, but I think that there has to be some level of glossary for all this stuff, because people will say, well, I don't have an EDU. I have a granny unit, or I have an in-law, or I have, you know, I have who knows what, but I think a glossary, because there's so much here to really think about the scenarios as we've discussed already. And there's also, which is a bit different, but there's board and care. Board and care can be from anywhere from 6 to 14. And there's also family daycare. Family daycare, because I've been in the business, was in the business for 45 years, they stay overnight sometimes. And so, okay, so what does that mean? They're licensed by the Department of Social Service, so it's very different, but they are licensed. They have to get a license through us. So there are those components. And you know, where do they fall into that? Let's see. Look at my questions. So anyway, those are my comments on that area. And then I was looking at the complaints. There were 11 complaints, but I heard you say tonight they were from 2018. So there truly isn't too many complaints in 2 years when you think about it. I mean, if you live next door, it probably is a horrible thing, but 11 complaints in 2 years isn't horrendous. And also, I find it interesting. All of this is really just interesting in its information, right? And there's for myself, I'm the kind of person who wants to get in there, dig in and start working the process and looking at the pros and cons and all the scenarios and how it weighs out. And what I feel would be worse is to put so much control into it that it just makes it just not manageable well. And but then there's also when it talks about in the last paragraph, kind of in the middle, it talks about, let me see if I could read this. The entire house rented out to different parties out to different parties. Now, without adequate supervision from the property owner. So you're talking about different parties, meaning different people unknown to each other, is how I interpret that, which is not unusual in a college town. You know, in a place where in today's market, because housing is so difficult, it's not unusual for it to happen almost anywhere anymore. And so in the monitoring of all that, you know, let's see, I'm looking at now on page 5 of 8. You've answered the question because I had a notation here about the workload to staff and the bandwidth to accommodate all of that, but applications, but you've addressed that issue. Oh, and on the next one under where it talked about the biannual, some people interpret that as twice a year. Biannual means every other year, but it semi-monthly is twice a month, or semi-annually is twice a year. But maybe just in parens to put in that parens for clarification, because some people look at that as biannual, meaning it could be twice, right? It could be twice, and could be a language, could be lots of different things. So I would recommend for the clarification purpose. I do agree that looking at the rates at 750, 550, I'm glad to hear that there's going to be going back to take a look at some of those areas for, is it aligned well with cost and all? I mean, it's important that the city gets revenue, and as my commissioner, my colleague indicated, been sitting on this for a long time, but the best time to do is now, and it's good to move forward. But it's also important that it's done without being onerous to the applicants. Okay, and I think down here, whole house rentals. I have a question here, but I don't know what that means. Such as, where it says establish clear requirements for owners. I'm not sure that I quite understand. The ordinance would set requirements for owners such as owner occupancy validation through the permit process and posting of local contact information for guests and the local blah, 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 blah. You know, I got really wordy and whatever, and I just couldn't get to the point of thinking, okay, what is the actual goal here? And just having language that's clear. And sometimes when you send it out to agencies, they have their own, all of their own verbiage, and layman's terms are really important. So I really want to encourage that. And something here that I Oh, and then on page 7 of 8, the third bullet, when it talks about enter into a voluntary collection agreement, BTA, with Airbnb, does Airbnb currently offer this service?
I am not the best person to answer. I'll do my best to explain. Airbnb does offer an agreement for city to enter with them so that Airbnb will remit some of the online taxes that they have been collected. However, Airbnb opts out of providing the detailed information of how those fees are collected or these taxations were collected. Currently, the city of San Bruno does not have a contract or an agreement with Airbnb to take these money.
Right. It's premature. Right. Okay. All right, and then the last paragraph, should the city council choose to reduce the maximum number of days per year of hosted and or non-hosted units, accessory dwelling units and or zoning, when you read some of these pieces, you have to read them and reread them. If there is going to be, I'm sure there would be much easier clarification once it gets down to the implementation of an applicant. It'll be much clearer, and there's nothing better than tables and putting sometimes the number of bodies or heads or symbols that indicate what it is. Tables make all the difference in the world. Okay, I think that's what I've gotten so far. All right, thank you.
Sure. Through the chair, if I can just provide some clarification to Commissioner Johnson's question. So in the world of short-term rentals, again, we're talking about anyone who is a transient occupant staying at a location for less than 30 days. So this will take out anyone who is a college student who's staying in a facility permanently for more than a month.
Okay, so though, but it indicates maximum days per year is 120.
That's adding it up. So if I stay 2 days this weekend, 2 more days next weekend, collectively this entire year, this unit can only be rented out up to 120 days, but
I
not
understand that.
right. So, but not 120 days consecutively.
So in other words, they would limit a person who has an Airbnb to 120 days a year.
Correct. However, each duration will have to be less than 30 days.
So you can potentially have, I'm sorry that I feel
okay.
Good. So you can potentially have a person staying there 29 days and then a new person 29 throughout the whole year.
Up to 120 days.
Up to 120 days.
That's correct.
All right. So you cannot utilize the whole year. So if you think that you're going to utilize your unit for an entire year, that you actually have a unit, that basically it's 120 days out of the year.
Correct.
Let's say I put an ADU in the back of my hill on Sweeney Ridge. And so the max that I would get is 120 days.
Right. 120 days, correct. So for instance, you have an ADU in the backyard. You have a renter who wants to stay permanently. So he or she will have a monthly lease with you.
Right, that's different.
Right, that's different. However, if you're not able to secure a renter, somebody wants to rent this weekend plus next weekend plus the weekend after, just make sure that each duration is less than 30 days and collectively these days added up is no more than 120 days.
That's interesting.
So that's the first clarification. Secondly, you mentioned there's the care facility. So there's the long-term care, there's the child care possibly. They're actually in a different land use category. They're the care facility. So there are actually three different categories. And in the world of short-term residential rentals, for instance, using you as an example, you could rent out a room in your house while you still live in your house. That's what we call the hosted stays, because you are also hosting your guest. If you somehow think that you will be traveling and your house will be vacant most of the time, you could put your house on the market where the entire house is available for rent less than 30 days, or you are not on the same site, which is a non-hosted stay. Or the third scenario is the ADU in the backyard that could also be rented out while you are still occupying in the main dwelling unit.
And if you are not to be in that dwelling unit, then you could not let that.
Correct. If you do not live in that unit, you cannot rent out your ADU for short-term rental purpose.
Yeah, like for instance, we go to Australia for long periods of time. So now it's never been more than 6 weeks. However, that is, you know, let's say we wanted to stay there 3 months. So would that be considered us being in, I mean, it's still our home.
Then if you have your house in ADU and you're in Australia, you want to rent out your main house, that's fine. That's a non-hosted stay. But you just have to make sure your visitors don't stay more than 30 days at a time.
Like
however, you cannot rent out your main house and ADU at the same time.
Interesting.
So that's the main difference. And then the biannual limit is really every other day, but I do agree that there will be more clarification.
Yeah, I mean, we have lots of different people with different interpretations and languages, and so in all fairness, the clearer the better.
And the other thing I do want to provide clarification is that there is no commercial operation allowed in short-term rental, i.e. Somebody who wants to rent a nice home to host a wedding, do a corporate retreat, some sort of a party. No, this is only for overnight accommodation, sleeping arrangement, those type.
Okay, so I do know that there are several, like in our in a couple of organizations in San Bruno, they look for locations to have someone come in while they're working on a project, and it might be a 6 months project, and they're staying there for 6 months. So that would be into a lease agreement, basically. Okay, I'm trying to wrap my brain around all the components. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for staff from the commission? Okay. All right, so I don't think that we have opened a public hearing for this yet. So if we have no more commission questions for staff, we'll move to open a public hearing. Melissa, do we have any members of the public who would like to raise their hands and make comment?
I see no hands raised, no.
Okay. So in that case, I could entertain a motion to close public comment or public hearing.
Yes.
I will move to close the public hearing.
Okay, roll call, please.
Chair Lathin.
Aye.
Vice Chair Biasotti.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Harmon.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye.
You have 6-0 votes.
Okay, Great, thank you very much. Public hearing is closed, and we'll bring it back to the commission. Do any of the commissioners, I know we already did a lot of speaking about it, but do commissioners have any other comments or discussion?
I have a quick question, which was I know I had suggested that the council consider adjusting the day regulation to focus on the parcel rather than the dwelling unit. And I believe there was another recommendation for comment that I've forgotten what it is, but I wasn't clear whether that just sort of automatically gets forwarded or whether we want to sort of include those recommendations as part of our resolution.
Typically, those will be included as a meeting summaries. So I do know that there is a comment made by Commissioner Harmon about how long each unit could be rented out, whether or not it's a combination of 120 plus 120, or there should be a cap on per property. I also have a note that the mentioned $750 and $500 permit fee and the annual renewal fee could be too high. So I'll be also noting that to the to City Council in a meeting summary. The resolution that you will be taking action tonight is basically forwarding your recommendation, should you will, to City Council in adopting the ordinance. But your comments will definitely be included in the staff report as part of the Planning Commission hearing summary.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I have a question for Pamela. Are the days, those 120 days, all of the date times, are they in alignment with other cities, basically?
The cities that we have surveyed do vary quite a bit. If you look at the matrix, certain cities actually have no limit on how many days that can be rented out. But some cities, with that said, don't allow ADUs to be rented out. So it's hard to make a fair comparison. Sometimes you'll be comparing apples and oranges, but 100 days, about 90 days, 120 days is about the average where cities do want to put some sort of annual limit.
And what is the reason for that?
So that it's not taking the housing stock completely from the market. So say that if you reserved a unit to be made available 365 days, then this is not available for a regular person who wants to permanently stay in that unit.
Mm-hmm.
And yet again, there is another statement that staff made. This is really to help the resident to optimize the utilization of existing housing stock. So like you sometimes who travel on a vacation to somewhere else for a duration of time, longer duration, or your house sitting there vacant, you could optimize a little bit of income by allowing people to stay at your property.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that.
Just one other comment. I'd like to recommend to the council that they make the permitting for a year, not 6 months. Okay?
Okay. All right, I'll note that.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any other comments? Okay. For myself, I wanted to say thank you for all the thought that all the commissioners have given this. It's really detailed and really, it's really important, I think, to find a balance between maintaining the stock of longer term rentals for folks who want to live in this area with the shortage that we have, but then also respecting property owners' right to a certain degree to leverage their properties to bring them some income, because that's not easy here either. So I really do appreciate the thought that's given to this. I also do support pursuing the taxation through the listing sites, Airbnb, whoever. I really don't want to I don't want to encourage further burdening staff with collecting this on top of the other duties that they are performing to help us in the city. And I'd never heard of what Commissioner Hamilton had mentioned, which is putting the burden on the sites themselves. I'd heard of third-party businesses that will track folks down and collect and manage all of that. But if there is a way and you could dig into whatever magic Redwood City is doing, I think that would be really beneficial. Oh, my last question for staff was, I keep seeing a 3-bedroom limit, and I'm sorry, I don't have the report in front of me because I don't. But was there a limit to renting? I don't know how to use the screen to do 2 things at once. I just don't. What can folks rent out a whole house that is more than 3 bedrooms?
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
you can. So the 3-bedroom is that if you are also still living at your house, and say that you have an 8-bedroom house, you're occupying 1 and you want to rent out 7. So the limit will be 3. However, if you do have the 8-bedroom house and you're like Commissioner Johnson, who travels to Australia from time to time, you could put the entire house on the market for a short-term rental use.
Okay. Okay, that seems like good flexibility. I was just confused by the 3-bedroom mention. So
through the chair, excuse me for interrupting.
Yes.
So I don't want to leave that question. So if I can put the whole house, not that I'm going to, but if you can put the whole house on the market, can it be, if you have 8 bedrooms, can it be to 8 individual people?
No, this will be 1.
Okay.
That will be 1.
That's what I thought.
Not 1 individual, but 1 party.
1 party.
One family or 1 group of friends. One online transaction, if you will.
Oh, well, then you can, that's a workaround. That's for sure. It's 1 transaction and someone says, okay, I'll be the one. You know, we had that issue in across the bay, right? One person rented it, and then they had a variety of people staying there. And then they had that party, and then they had that death, and on and on. So that's a huge workaround.
Right, right.
Can't control everything, I guess.
Well, through the chair, there's absolutely nothing stopping that scenario from happening in San Bruno tomorrow.
That's right.
Except that we wouldn't get anything for it.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, as an additional comment, I do find it a little peculiar that we would place stricter limits on the hosted stay than on the unhosted. I mean, it's like if you have the 8-bedroom house, having the property owner on the premises seems like it acts as a little bit of a break on some of the, you know, potentially wilder scenarios. So I do wonder if it's even worth retaining that 3-bedroom limit, you know, if the unhosted stay is unlimited. But I mean, again, I'm fine with forwarding it and considering amendments later anyway.
Because people will bunk however they want. It's like a hotel. I mean, there are hundreds of conferences where there are teachers and your teachers really want, there's 2 queen beds and there's 4 to a room. And so
that's long-term housing. I mean, to be clear, like I've used Airbnb a fair bit. I mean, I've gone places, you know, a group of friends and I, you know, went to Portland and rented a whole house, and the family that owned it basically moved into their ADU for the weekend, and like 16 of us were in a, you know, 7-bedroom house or something, and it's fine for a weekend for a convention. And for the most part, people are not rowdy or whatever. It's fine.
That's right.
But I just, as an observation on the content of the ordinance, I think, you know, if you're going to say that the unhosted stay, you could rent out the whole house, then like, you know, saying that if it's a hosted stay, you can only rent out 3 bedrooms instead of 4 or 5 seems actually kind of unreasonable.
Yeah, I would agree.
To piggyback on to Commissioner Harmon's comment, I also don't see a benefit to penalizing a hosted stay in that sense. But would those 3 bedrooms also, would those be unrelated parties, or would that be a single party renting those bedrooms?
That will be 3 unrelated parties. So for instance, you have 3 extra bedroom. Me, somebody else, and somebody else could be occupying each of the bedroom. We're all 3 unrelated individuals. In terms of punishing the hosted or non-hosted stay, I guess I wouldn't necessarily categorize in that sense. When staff brought this item to council for consideration in January, for study session, we actually conducted a at a glance how many short-term rentals are available in San Bruno, and be mindful this is pre-COVID-19, so the scenarios and the landscape is quite different today, which is the reason I decided not to show that slide to you. At a time, there's a variety of different accommodations provided in City of San Bruno. You'll see that most of the hosted rooms or hosted stays are along our downtown transit corridor where they're close to BART and Caltrain. So people are coming in, staying for a night, they are only looking for a bedroom. And these are in the smaller setting, where there are large mansions and large estates with amenities to offer up in the hills, or other families or a family gathering or reunion are looking for a setting like that. So I think they're attracting different audience. So I wouldn't necessarily putting the two in a fair comparison. But I do see that, to answer Chair Lithing's question, is that if you have a house, and most houses in San Bruno unfortunately do not have 8 bedrooms. They usually are in about 3-bedroom range. So if you're occupying in 1 or 2, you still have 1 or other that's available for rent, or your entire house of a 3-bedroom or 4 can be rented out. So the scenario that I threw out earlier with 8-bedroom is more of an anomaly.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. If we don't have any more comments from the commission, I guess that we can entertain an action.
Through the chair,
Yes.
I'd like to, oh, it was on my screen, there it goes. I would like to propose that we adopt the resolution recommending the City Council adopt the ordinance amending chapter 12.80 and adding chapter 12.270.
I'll second it.
Okay, great. Roll call, please.
Chair Lithin,
Aye.
Vice Chair Biasotti,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Aye.
Commissioner Harmon,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye.
You have 6-0 votes.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. That passes. That is the end of our hearing items. And we'll move on to number 5, which is the items from staff.
Thank you. So I want to thank Commissioner Hamilton, Commissioner Harmon, and Vice Chair Biasotti to host the May very first City of San Bruno virtual Zoom Architectural and Review Committee hearing last Thursday. It went on smoothly, and thank you very much for your patience and accommodation working with staff. It's one of the first, and this is our second. So with that said, with the current shelter in place, which should be lifted in June, staff has not decided if the next hearing will either be a Zoom setting or a regular setting. However, we do want to ask for volunteers for the next June Architectural Review Committee meeting that will happen on June 11th. And like I said, at this point, it could either be another setting like this or a combination or hybrid, or but I do want to see if I can ask for any volunteers.
Volunteer.
Thank you.
I volunteer.
Thank you.
I can volunteer as well.
Okay, and I'll take Vice Chair as the backup.
Cool.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
Oh, I wanted to say hi. Hi, Darcy Smith.
Hi.
Hi, Darcy.
Full time, but I'm following the do's of hiding your video. But I just wanted to say hi to everyone. So happy to see you guys. And I really would applaud you on tonight's success and how professional you've been, and how your role in leading the city planning commission into this difficult time. And I just want to emphasize, many of us at the city have been here every single day. Pamela has been in the office continuously. And I just wanted to say we brought the building staff and code enforcement staff full-time May 1st. So I know you don't see that because City Hall is closed to the public. We put together a great video that's on our department website. Looks like Tom saw it. If you saw it, it was played at the city council meeting last week. But I want to emphasize to you, since you're out in the community, that we are open on an appointment only basis. But we're happy to help anyone who needs to talk to the planning division or needs a building permit with the modification to the shelter in place order to allow all construction starting May 4th. We've seen more permits come in, and I want to emphasize we're open to the public 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. So I realize City Hall's doors are locked, and that's not the most welcoming. We're still trying to keep it as safe as possible for our employees who are here. And City Hall is almost full. I'll just tell you guys that it's a pretty full place. There's a lot of us working. So if anyone needs help, I just want to emphasize we're here to help. And we'd love to chat with you if you have any other questions that we can help you with. But I do hope we can open the doors soon. I don't have an exact time frame for reopening City Hall, but I want to emphasize we bring in our customers every day. We installed plexiglass at our counter, which you can see in the video, and so far everyone's been very healthy, and we're able to get our permits issued. So I also want to emphasize, just a source of pride, we are one of the leaders on the peninsula that reopened our building division to counter service, 8 a.m. May 4th. A lot of communities are still challenged to reopen their city halls for that service. We were incredibly blessed by city staff who were able to install plexiglass, work out a solution. We really are the city with the heart in a situation that requires us to adapt. So I just want to commend all the staff here and all of you in the community just for being adaptable. It's a time of great adaptation, but I'd like to just say our city has really done some amazing things. And I want to also thank Melissa Thurman, our city clerk, and our IT staff, Paul and Miriam, who are really, really leading the charge here with running the online meeting. So we've had a lot of city council meetings. I'm really pleased that this planning commission meeting went so well. But it's a true testament to the work of the city staff, and especially the city clerk, who is literally doing amazing work and frankly training other city clerks. And so I just want to commend her, as you've seen her leadership tonight. And I would just inspire anyone out there, you as planning commissioners are leaders in our community. So, please get involved. The chamber is doing some great work with the businesses. And Sam Sita, another county organization, is doing some great work. So I know that the chamber just launched some efforts, and I'm trying to bring in the chamber staff to make a presentation to council that hopefully you can watch. But check out the chamber website, because they're really, really blessed with a grant from the Community Foundation to try to do some business work. And of course, as the Community and Economic Development Department, we also help businesses, but the chamber and the BAEC have really stepped up, honestly, in the last 2 weeks to do outreach and support. So spread the word, and please, many of you, again, you're leaders in our community, so reach out and try to support anyone who needs help, especially in the business community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Darcy.
And then through the chair, I just want to acknowledge Kelly for, my gosh, Kelly, this is your first meeting and it was seamless. You did such a great job. I really want to say thank you. You lead us well anyway, with thoughtfulness and always with clarity and with so much prep that you do behind the scenes. And this meeting went seamless, and I just acknowledge you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I did want to, as a customer, I believe the permit that is in process for my own property has been one of the ones that's gone through this new process in our brave new world, and I appreciate the work that you guys have been doing to make that happen.
That's wonderful. Okay, well, thank you. And then we cannot forget our opportunity for second public comment. Do we need to open that?
No, the only time a comment period needs to be opened is if it is an advertised public hearing. Public comment, general public comment items not on the agenda does not need to be open or closed officially with a motion and a second. It can just be addressed. Is there any member of the public that chooses to speak? That sort of thing. And then if none, then you can just move on.
Okay, so the ones at the beginning and the end of the meeting in general are comment, and they do not require a formal closing.
That is correct.
Okay, and then, but on each item, we do still need to do that.
If it is a public hearing item, which staff would know the difference, and it should be listed on the agenda as public hearing, if it
Okay.
is that kind of an item.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. In that case, I don't think we have any members of the public left.
Nope, I don't see any hands up.
Okay. All right. So then we'll move to adjournment. The next Planning Commission meeting will be held on June 16th, 2020 at 7 p.m. And it's my understanding it's yet to be decided what the format of the meeting will be. And that folks should check the city website for details as they are available.
Or I will provide more detail.
Okay. All right. Thank you for letting us know, Pamela. The time is 9:20 p.m. and we are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. You're a rock star.
Oh, thank
I
you.
appreciated the visit by Tom's cat, and my Commissioner Kayan visited as well.
I know, it's both very cool looking cats.
Thank you.